I shuffle backwards to form up with the rest of Unit Bravo as figures emerge like solid shadows from the trees around us. As they stalk closer, they look to be human. I'm guessing they're trappers by the electric prods they're each wielding. They came prepared, Farah mutters. The troop of them divide into smaller groups, converging on us from all sides in a pincer movement that has us twisting and turning to make sure we can see them all. I give up counting after 30. Ava's gaze flickers upwards to the sun where the light is only just beginning its slow descent over the backdrop of trees. I knew we'd be at our weakest with the sun still out, she states, sounding a smidgen impressed at their tactics. I'll take the left group, Morgan says, nodding her head over towards the 6 trappers leering at us from that direction. Ava glances back over her shoulder to Morgan. I don't like the idea of splitting up, especially with us weakened. I don't think we're going to have much of a choice, Morgan grunts in reply. Ava finally gives a nod. All right, watch your backs, watch your flanks, and don't die. You don't have a better plan than that, I counter with a frown. I wasn't talking to you, she replies, shaking her head in my direction before flashing her gaze to Farah. Those trappers aren't here for us. Keep them safe. I stand straight up while flicking my hands out on either side of me. What? But the others are gone before I can say anything more. An eruption of battle shouts and groans saturating the clearing. It's all right, Farah mumbles, moving close to my side and sliding her hand into mine. I've got your back, babe. While Unit Bravo do a good job of keeping most of the trappers distracted, a small group of them peel away from the main pack and tread toward us. Blue electricity crackles beside them as they wield prods out like swords. We've got this, Farah encourages me, squeezing my hand before letting it go to draw her hands up in front of her. I believe her, she just makes me feel I can do it all. I draw in a breath and ready myself. The trappers outnumber us, but you wouldn't believe it was an issue at all with the way Farah easily takes down the first. She rushes forwards, bursting into the trapper's space and knees him in the groin. The man goes down with a squeaked yell and remains still for a very long time. Farah throws a wink and a grin my way. I shake my head, though the confidence pouring through me with her at my side almost radiates out through my pores. As the trapper rushes at me, I try to spin away, but the sharp prong of her prod cuts a thin line against my arm. I wheeze at the sting, but thankfully I don't suffer the effects of the crackling sparks that snap from the weapon. I fling out my arm, my own marginally enhanced stun gun gripped in my hand, and jab the weapon into the trapper's side. She flops to the ground in a shaking heap. Nice, Farah calls, a trapper caught in her headlock. She slams her knee up and whacks it into the trapper's nose while throwing out an extended palm at another and slamming them back against the tree at the same time. Even I wince at the impact. She lets the knocked out trapper and her grasp plummet to the ground before leaning casually against a tree. Her charming grin is aimed in my direction, and it seems to shine out in place of the steadily setting sun. Focus. I flick a finger out towards the bows happening near us. The rest of our team is fighting to help us, I remind her. You should be just as focused, Farah. She slides a gaze out towards where I'm pointing. Don't worry so much. We'll win. You don't know that. My words are punched out of me as a trapper bursts from nowhere and tackles me to the ground. Air wheezes out of my body as I slam into the unyielding dirt. My spine and lungs sting with fire as I try to gasp in air, my eyes watering. I'm suddenly glad the grass is so thick, or my head might have resembled watermelon hitting concrete. Jules! My name erupts from Farah with such fear that it penetrates even the haze of sore agony which grips my head. From the edge of my blurry vision, I can see my attacker get back onto his feet and stretch to his full height, looming above me. He turns and spreads his arms out, blocking my view of Farah as though guarding his prize. Back off, vampire, or I might not go so soft on you, he warns as his feet shift in front of my dazed body. There's no reply from Farah. Pain racks every inch of me, but there's no way I'm leaving Farah alone in this. Yeah, we're deducing a plan. I'll find some tech. Now we're deducing a plan. There has to be something I can do, some plan I can concoct to help us get out of this situation. But my mind draws a blank, halted by the wall of bruising aches which batter my body. Oh, we're so useless. My hands fall to my sore sides, where my fingers brush over my Volt gun holstered at my hip. I glance at the trapper. It's worth a shot. So I force myself off the ground and waver on my unsteady feet. My grip falters on my Volt. It drops to the grass with a gentle thump. I almost topple backwards as the trapper swings around to face me. His features twist into an angered frown. You're not going anywhere. The yell I let fly is strangled in my tight throat as the man jabs the sharp prongs of his prod into my shoulder. The vibrant blue sparks crackle across my skin and bite into my muscles. I drop heavier than a lead weight. My limbs writhe out of control even as I grit my teeth to try and steady them. But my already bruised body can't fight against the electric intrusion. My vision flashes red and purple, spasms course through my nerves, my jaw locks so tight I can barely breathe, and a metallic bitterness spreads across my tongue. When the pain subsides, I spread against the coolness of the lush grass and try not to cry with relief. A hand falls softly against my cheek, but withdraws when I flinch. "Sorry," Ra mumbles. "I didn't know if you were awake or if you were okay." "Define okay," I groan. She forces out a light laugh. "Can you stand up?" "Hopefully." I accept Farah's help, noticing her sudden strength as the gloom of the evening is cast over us. "I'm sorry," Farah says, stepping closer to help steady me, guilt causing a knot between her brows. "This was my fault." "It was the trapper's fault," I state, throwing a sneer down at the unconscious form of the trapper at our feet. "I'm guessing that was your work?" Farah bucks up a little. "When the sun went down, he wasn't exactly much of a challenge." I try a chuckle, but puff out a strange noise instead. She grips my arms a little tighter. "I'll be all right," I reassure her, already feeling the numbness fading from my limbs, the returning sensation providing no small amount of relief. We begin our walk towards the center of the clearing to meet up with the others. My steps are wobbling, but I'm helped to keep steady by Farah's arm about me. The rest of Unit Bravo are already heading our way as we approach. Even through the shadow, I can see the way their bodies straighten and seem to expand, as though injected with a sudden energy the darkness had brought with it. Nat doesn't pay attention to the scene about us, instead moving next to me as I limp closer. "What happened?" "I'm all right," I reply, patting her arm. It doesn't help much to rid the anxiety on her features. Morgan rolls her head back towards the edge of the clearing. "Should we go after them?" We all turn to look. Any trappers not dealt with by the vampires are staggering away into the forest towards whatever escape they can find. Ava shakes her head. "The agency will deal with any stragglers." "I'll call my mother," I say, pulling my phone out of my pocket and inwardly sighing in relief to find it unharmed from the melee. As I hunch my head down over my phone, a reflection of something bright swims on the screen. For a moment, I wonder if it's the moon's glow against the murky pool of black that is my screen, but when I swipe my thumb across the shiny surface, the object keeps moving. I stare up and watch as a large silver feather sways down towards me through the air, a shimmering sheen casting gold across its surface in the moonlit darkness. Ava strides forwards and bends down to retrieve it. Her strong fingers look like they might crush the tip of the delicate feather as she examines it. I step closer with a frown. "It's just like the feather I found at the crime scene." "We never got the chance to see that one before it was sent to the lab," Nat says, joining the small huddle. Her muscles go rigid as soon as her eyes land on it. "Ava?" "What?" The team leader snaps her gaze to her apparently terrified friend. Nat's head tips skyward. "That feather, it's from the wing of an Anunnaki." Ava recoils from the feather so fast it swims in the air for a while before sinking onto the grass. "It can't be. There are none in our world any longer." Ava flusters. "What's an Anunnaki?" I interject. "A problem," Ava states, pacing backwards a few steps and staring upwards. "You cannot be here, detective." "Why?" It seems the only thing I'm full of is questions and confusion. Her expression tightens as she keeps scanning the dark sky. "Because we might not be able to stop them." I've been exposed to so much these past few months that few things are certain in my life anymore. But what I thought would never falter was Ava's confidence in her team's abilities. So the doubt that strangles her voice has me almost following her suggestion and fleeing from the scene. But a gust of air nearly knocks us all off our feet, and any thought of escape I had is blown away. A heavy, dull thump sounds from behind me. I swing around and crane my neck upwards to take in the sheer size of the man before me. I don't often have to look up to people, so the prickles of panic that had already been taking hold now begin to truly claw at my nerves. I stumble back to the safety of the team's presence as we huddle in together. It's obvious where the feather came from, as two gigantic wings of glistening silver feathers flank either side of the towering man before us. The golden sheen of the feathers glitters as he shrugs to bring the wings tight behind his broad back. His muscle-laden chest is uncovered, the moonlight reflecting from his deep taupe skin. Long liquid locks of black hair drape over his shoulders, which look as strong as the tree trunks behind him. His lower half is thankfully covered by plain dark trousers. No shoes, though. No one speaks, not him, not us. Hmm. We'll go with that. My body is solid with anticipation of what the next few moments might bring. The tension in my muscles knots tighter at the hostility and uncertainty brimming in the silence. What do you want? I ask, keeping my voice steady and holding the man's pewter gaze. He breathes a hollow, sad laugh. A question I am often greeted with. Tell us, I press, balling my fists at my sides and tightening my lips. You do not wish to know my purpose here, child? The winged man states. Purpose? Nat asks. Child? I add with a wrinkle of my nose. Do you mean to harm them? Ava adds to the conversation. I do not wish to harm anyone, the man asserts, standing taller, but his stature quickly sinks as his gaze dances away into the shadow behind us. But I will if I am denied what I am here for. His words trail into a whispered mutter I can't quite hear, not helped by the fact that it's also in another language. But Nat does catch it. She instantly steps past me with hands outstretched and pleading and replies in the same language. I don't get all the words, but I definitely recognize some that are similar to Old Aramaic. From Nat's plea, I managed to pick up the words help you and choice. When she finished, the winged man almost reels back in shock at either Nat's words or the fact she could speak the language. You know Old Aramaic? I whispered to Nat. At this point, I don't even know why I'm surprised. My mother taught me as my father taught her. He was apparently quite the language expert after he left Persia to travel, she explains with a wistful smile. I catch on to the was apparently part and frown. Did Nat not know her father either? The question is blasted from my mind as I'm dragged back to our current dilemma. The winged man shakes his head, gritting his teeth for a moment, before staring back at us with a steely resolve. Your words are well meant, but pointless. I will take the human. His eyes scan the entire group of us. Resisting will only cause you harm. A growl rumbles from Morgan, her top lip curled back to reveal her two top fangs growing until they almost pierce her bottom lip. Geez, you're sure full of yourself, Farah comments. He smiles over at Farah with a dulled expression. Centuries of experience have given me reason to be so, young vampire. A sadness once again pervades the man's demeanor. Unit Bravo and I all glance at each other in silent understanding. This will lead to another fight, but this time they all step out ahead of me as a barrier. I frown. What are you doing? You cannot participate in this, detective, Ava informs me in a surprisingly soft tone. You must run. You want me to what? I demand with a sharp shake of my head. I just faced trappers. I can handle this. What are you talking about? How can you even compare that? And you didn't face the trappers. You got ruined by one of them. Those trappers were human, Ava shakes her head. This man is far from it. As I pass my gaze to the winged man, I can't deny the aura of power that radiates from him. There's a confidence and self-assuredness to the tall way he holds himself, as well as the calm patience with which he's waiting for us to finish our conversation. I open my mouth, but Ava holds up a hand and turns away. I'm still commanding agent of this team, a team you are part of, and you will do as I command. Take it down a notch, Ava. Farah cuts in with a breath blown out between pinched lips. She turns on the spot to stand before me and takes up both of my hands with a smile. The expression doesn't reach her eyes. I won't tell you what to do, Jules, but I am asking you. Ava's right. This time, I think you need to think about yourself. I begin, but my words are halted as she squeezes my hands. When you go, just keep running, she whispers, holding my gaze until my resolve crumbles. She turns, her hands sliding from mine, and rushes back to the rest of the group as they dash at the awaiting stranger. The vampires skid to a halt a little away from the winged man, which I assume is a tactic of some kind, until I squint through the twilight dusk and notice them all throwing puzzled looks to each other. Farah reaches a hand forwards, and her fingertips hit some kind of invisible wall. The only indication of the barrier is a slight shimmer to the air where Farah touches it. Your attempts to save the human are admirable, the man says before shaking his head, but they are pointless. Farah draws her fingers back from the barrier and shakes her hand off, as though ridding it of something. You say that now, but just wait until we get going. The man zeroes in on the youngest vampire, but not with any kind of threat, only with pity. Farah is suddenly a flash of motion as she launches at the barrier. An eruption bursts from the invisible wall, and Farah is launched back across the clearing. She slams into the ground in an explosion of grass and mud. Nausea squeezes at my stomach. Farah! I blink as a sickening sense of deja vu overwhelms me. Murphy's wild eyes sear against my memories. His blood-induced frenzy is fresh in my mind as though it happened yesterday. It takes a serious amount of mental exertion to channel those memories back into the dark recesses of my mind. I can't go through this again. The fort rocks against me as I flick my gaze between the vampires, staring in disbelief at their fallen comrade and the stranger. The stranger who has taken advantage of the vampire's distraction and is marching my way. The winged man bounds up a step, extending his wings so that he soars in the air and lands heavily almost directly before me. I understand now why the vampires stopped in their tracks. There's a prickle in the air in front of the man, the atmosphere distorting and vibrating, itching against my skin. It seems he can expand and contract the barrier as he wishes, and I'm much closer to him than the vampires managed to get. You must surrender, human. He says this as though it's an inevitability, as though I have no choice. My mind flurries with plans and ideas, anything that might help. If I could just drop that invisible wall around him. The man shakes his head. You cannot penetrate this barrier unless I wish it so. Do not do anything you would regret. You read minds too? I shoot back. No, but I have been in these situations many times before, and what you hope to achieve has never succeeded. His voice is calm, almost soothing, which just means it grates against me stronger. I mean, that's what I was thinking of. But, well, what I was thinking of specifically, a lot of this depends on how the barrier works exactly. Because what I was thinking of, if the barrier kind of just rejects everything around him, then what I need to do is get close to him to the point where, and sort of just communicate with, Bravo, that they attack him at the moment I get close and kind of am, going through that barrier, because he has to, but at the same, if he can just expand the barrier around me now, I mean, though, if he could, well, I mean, none of, try to shove him back, that's not going to work, barrier. So throw a punch at him, barrier. Everyone's underestimating you for a reason. Panic and retreat a step away from him doesn't sound like an idea that would ever work. The only thing that might do is give us some time, but the thing is, if I'm the one meant to attack, then that's not going to work. But I need to remind you, where is it? Is it in professional? Yeah, that's just not going to work. But I think it's out of those options, try to shove him back is never going to work. None of these would, these three are always just dumb. These three all have some kind of potential of doing something. This is also an option I'm considering, because it's very non-specific. It might entice a conversation. Okay, you know what? We are going. Although I really want to do that. I don't think there's any way for us to get out of this. I think we will be taken. It's just a matter of how. You know what? Sure. We'll go with that. I understand the seriousness of the situation I'm in, but all these people telling me what I can or can't do, expecting me to just follow along in the supernatural world because I'm what, a human? It's becoming more than just an irritation. I'm getting seriously tired of everyone underestimating me, I bark. You are a human. It is not an underestimation, it is merely a fact, he replies. He doesn't sound spiteful or mean, it's just as though he's stating the way of the world. And that has anger writhing in a hot knot inside of me. I burst with a yell that echoes around the clearing as I shove my hands against him. That is exactly what I did not want you to do. His eyes widen as the hit makes contact and he stumbles back. What? Okay. The shock keeping him off balance until his foot catches on a half-sunken log. He hits the ground with a grunt. My rage fizzles away as I stare at him in shock before dropping my amazed gaze to my hands. The hell just happened? How? The man begins. A slash of fear cuts across his face. He takes a breath and launches from the ground in a rush of wind that almost forces me to my knees. I stare up to watch him fly away against the star-speckled night sky until his winged silhouette has disappeared. Okay, that turned out a lot better than I expected. Okay, sure. I mean, it's probably because I am not just a human. All right. I'm brought back to the ground as a hand wraps softly around my shoulder. Are you all right? Nat asks in a flurry, examining me with a quick glance. How did you get through his barrier? A smile seeps over her lips. I guess you still have some hidden talents. As the rest of the vampires make their way over to join us, a wash of relief has my stomach settling when I see that Farah is just fine. I'm going to assume you didn't know that you could break through the Anunnaki's barrier? Ava asks, folding her arms and waiting for a response. I blink to settle the thoughts bashing about inside my skull. No idea. I thought their mutation didn't work against physical abilities and only mental ones. Morgan remarks as she settles back to lean against a tree, shoving aside one of the trappers who have thankfully all remained unconscious. Nat lifts a brow and steps up in front of me. That was what we thought, but either something has changed or there's more to it than we originally guessed. Maybe the barrier is a mental ability, not a physical one. Farah glances up at the sky before looking back to us with a wince. Well, whatever happened, maybe we shouldn't hang around and see if we get lucky a second time. Agreed, Ava says with a quick nod over at the younger vampire. We should head to the facility and report what happened. Her gaze drops to the trappers scattered across the clearing and her nose wrinkles. And get this mess sorted. I couldn't nod any more enthusiastically, wanting not only to get away from here, but also into somewhere that has a roof. Good idea. Deep in the forest away from the town. The winged man drops heavily between the trees, his wings snagging and snapping small branches in his path. It's the first time in many centuries he's made such an unsteady landing. As he straightens up to his considerable height, he rests a hand on his chest, an area that had been hit not long ago. The human's hands as they'd struck him had not hurt, but the shock of it still exists. He sometimes drops his barrier to allow those he faces to damage him, if only to help them feel better about the situation, as though they had managed to do something, as he had with that girl's parents. But this, with that human, he had not allowed that, and yet they'd gotten past his defenses anyway. He rubs his fingers over his skin where they had struck, blinking rapidly as his mind races. A painfully familiar voice from ahead has his hand snapping back to his side. The winged man strides closer to the bustle of activity that's buzzing in the steep area of the forest. It's amazing so much work can be done amongst the thick of towering trees. He pays it little mind and continues on, his bare feet finding warmth in a mossy, muddied trail carved out by the bustling workforce. No, the lights have to go way up overhead. His leash holder snaps, waving her arms. Oh, that's a woman, okay. Upwards in emphasis. Or how else will a guest be able to properly see our wares, huh? Though there's a sweetness to her voice, a warning glare cuts through her narrowed eyes. The pointy-eared workman gives a wobbly bow of his head and levitates higher up to the branches above, hoisting a quartz chandelier as he goes. As the winged man approaches, he stops a few steps away from his keeper, a temptation to erect his barrier petering out at the last second. His keeper swings to face him, flicking her gaze around. Well, she snaps, where's the human? She waves her hand at the empty space on either side of him, her long bright painted nails flashing like talons. There was a complication, he explains, shifting on the spot and clasping his hands in front of him. The leash holder gives a withering stare, crosses her arms and rocks back on her heels. It must be a human talent to balance on such thin high heels and not sink into the mud. A complication? She asks in a taut tone that sets the winged man on edge. You struggled with 4 puny vampires? You? No, not them, but the human. He frowns and places his hand on his chest. They got through my barrier. His keeper's mouth drops. What? Hey! Another flick of the keeper's hand silences him. Oh, that was him. Okay. Yes, I heard you. She begins to pace back and forth across the small space, her uncertainty keeping the winged man on edge. When she suddenly stops, the winged man flinches. Seems the mutation must be stronger than we thought. She glances over the winged man with a sniff. Well, you're not as strong as I thought. He tries not to bristle at the implication. And yes, this may be a complication, but I also think it means we can add another 0 onto the end of their estimation. The winged man blanches, and it takes a short breath to keep him from swaying. You plan to sell them? He shakes his head. That was not your agreement with. Just their blood. That's the only part my buyers are interested in, and it was a verbal agreement. His leash keeper cuts in. taking a moment to stop in front of a metallic urn and fluff out her auburn hair into reflection. The strict, straight end of it skims her slim shoulders as she does so. No one can rely on verbal agreements. The winged man holds back a sigh. But if I am powerless to them and your trappers don't seem any better, how will you take them? Oh, Sin, she coos, drawing the tip of her nail gently along his jaw. Do you doubt me? Sin stiffens, his muscles twitching when she speaks his name, the touch leaving an uneasy trail across his skin. Never. He's thankful his keeper is too distracted to notice his lie. I merely wondered. His keeper paces away and Sin lets out a breath, easing more into a relaxed stance with her gone. Then the leash keeper picks up a piece of paper, the human's face inked upon it. If we can't take them, then we'll just have to give them a reason to come to us instead. A wicked smile oozes across her features. One day can't resist. Guilt churns like a whirlpool inside Sin's stomach. Next chapter.